Okay, we left off here. Saturated fats from animals, full, packed, makes them solid room temperature, and unsaturated, not full of hydrogens. There's some double bonds in there. They're liquid at room temperature, generally from plants, but also fish. Nearly all animals use fat over glycogen for long-term storage. Why? Well, we got to move around. And guess what? Fat weighs less. The only way a hummingbird right there can get off the ground is if their fuel, which they use copious amounts, because have you ever been around one? Oh my goodness. It has to be light so that they can take their fuel with them. So fat is good. It's not all bad. Purposes of fat: insulation. This guy's heavily insulated against the cold. Polar bear bottoms of their feet, as well as these little guys, are heavily layered with fat so that they don't freeze. All right, purposes of lipids. Phospholipids. This guy we'll hear more about next module. But what we have here are phosphate, which is polar, hooked onto two legs that are lipids that are nonpolar. Where do we use them? Oh, in our cell membrane. This is the cell membrane. It's two layers of those phospholipids. This inside part here is not water soluble. It's nonpolar. The out part is. So it's going to attract what you need in your cell, and then this acts as a barrier and a gate, this nonpolar area, and keeps everything in or out until you decide with these molecules what comes in and what goes out. So that nonpolar there is pretty important. More here, it controls what enters and exits the cell, just like I was telling you. So the polar heads are on the outside of this row, and the polar heads are on, well, the inside of the cell here and the outside of the cell there, with those legs hanging down. All right, well, let's talk steroids. Kind of an amazing thing. They're 4 fused carbon rings, and cholesterol here, let's talk about that one, is the precursor for our body to make testosterone and this type of estrogen. Now, I love this picture for a kind of a cool reason. Testosterone and estrogen cause very different changes in the human body. I mean, it's significantly different. And look, all that's different is this guy and this guy. This guy's not here, and this is different. Bingo. I think that's crazy. Those are the functional groups that make things do what they do. So, cholesterol has a bad rap. It can cause some health issues. So if you have a diet high in saturated fats and cholesterol, it can contribute to circulatory disorders. And so that's what we have here building up in here, that plaque that you've heard about before. And there's what we call good cholesterol, high density, and low, bad. The low stuff is what really adds to this. Another thing lipids do are the waxes for us. So plants make them waterproof. If you have any of those, like a jade plant or whatever these are, they're hydrophobic. That means they have this waxy exterior. They probably are in an area that is arid or dry, and so they need to retain all their moisture. So it's protective covering. Humans, we have earwax in here that to repel insects, which always creeps me out, and traps dust and dirt. So that earwax is supposed to continually come out. And then, of course, honeybees use wax for their structure. How do we use wax? We put it in candles, anything polishing, cosmetics, totally full of it. All right, ready for proteins. Proteins, we call them first place. That's what they're based on because they're the most important thing, we think. 50% of dry weight of most cells are made of protein. So once you get the water out of there, we are talking protein. There are 6 main functions. We'll talk about each one separately here. Support. So that's the collagen for the ligaments, tendons, skin, hair, nails. Metabolism. Enzymes, man, you can't do anything without those enzymes. These guys, there's an active site on the enzyme. The substrate comes in, hooks on, and then through this interaction, 2 products are released. And so those kinds of reactions are important for life. Third group, transport. Those are those guys that go through the cell membrane that I showed you. These determine what enter and exit the cell. Defense, antibodies, bingo. It's the protein produced by the immune system in response to the presence of an antigen. So we have to identify it, and then we hook on an antibody, and then it can't hurt us anymore.